Discovering peace through present moment, awareness and non-attachment. All suffering in our lives occurs because of the mistaken belief that we are a permanent self. If we investigate, we will discover that the self we think we are is nothing but an illusion. Despite that, it does not mean that we lose that self. The thoughts, the sense there is a self in the body and mind do not go away. Much like the mirage in the desert, the self remains there, but we know it is a mirage, an illusion. The implication from that is that no matter what that self tells us with thoughts or emotions, we no longer believe it. If we don't believe it, it has no effect on us. It is the liberation we achieve from the illusory self, that is, self-realization. We realize that the mistaken belief we had about ourselves made us suffer because believing that there is a permanent self, instead of an illusion of a self, causes desires. So human suffering occurs because of ignorance of what we are. So we need to realize that there is no permanent self. We are just biological organisms in constant change. From the number of cells in the human body, estimated at 37.2 trillion, red blood cells alone, approximately 120 million red blood cells, die and are replaced every minute. Similarly, what we consider the self in our minds is actually a collection of constantly changing physical and mental components, including form, sensation, perception, and mental formations. Note that the implication is that if there is no self, there is no free will. We realize that our superficially created notion and common sense understanding of the self and free will is mistaken because it is an illusion. So we should revise it to better align with what science and real common sense tells us about human nature. As humans, we cannot find true peace unless we realize what we are. We are a collection of cells, a biological organism that acts as a control system to find food, reproduce, and generally survive. There is no person inside our body or mind. We give a name and refer to ourselves as independent persons as a convenience to referring to ourselves as biological organisms. If that is true, there is no free will because there is no independent self other than the biological organism we are. The biological organism is just a collection of cells that amount to a biological control system that is subject to chemical, genetic, and environmental influences. If so, when we decide something believing we are freely making a choice, we're actually making a choice that is dependent on all these biological, chemical, and environmental factors and variables. Our decisions are based on our hormonal levels, gene makeup, and societal values. There is no choice because there is no agent to make the choice, but even the illusionary self we think we are is making a choice dependent on these variables. So, there is no true free will. There is no independent agent, a little person in our minds that is making decisions inside the brain, but rather that our sense of self and our decision-making capabilities emerge from the complex activity of the brain. These phenomena arise from the biological machinery of our bodies. As biology, neuroscience, and other sciences have discovered, there is no person that is doing or is desiring things. We are a biological control system. There is no one except a collection of cells that act as an independent organism. There is no person in the body or mind. We are referring to ourselves as we or I as a short way of saying a biological control system organism that is constantly changing. The notion of a little man inside the brain making decisions and controlling actions is indeed a fallacy. This concept leads to an infinite regress, where if you have a little person in your brain making decisions, you would then need another little person inside the little man's brain making decisions for him, and so on ad infinitum. The scientific concept of emergent properties explains how the sense of self is created. The sense of I, and the capacity for reasoning and planning are viewed as emergent properties of the brain's complex biological processes. An emergent property is a characteristic that arises from the interplay of simpler elements, in this case, neurons and their connections, that do not possess the property themselves. This means that while no single neuron or specific part of the brain contains a self or an agent, the collective activity of the brain gives rise to the experiences and capabilities we associate with being an individual. To be happy, we must realize the self is an illusion. The self resides in the thoughts and emotions in our mind. Once we start living in the moment and do not believe the stories of the mind and emotions, we become serene and happy. Imagine standing amidst nature, where every breath brings you closer to serenity. That's the power of being in the present moment. Now, think of a feather floating in the air, not clinging to anything. This feather is you, not attached, simply being. Life often feels like a bustling city, but within, you can find a tranquil park if you choose to live now. The joy of living isn't in the past memories or future dreams. It's in this very moment, waiting to be cherished. Attachment to a self, to people, places, and things can weigh us down. Imagine releasing them, feeling lighter, and freely moving forward. Visualize a tree deeply rooted yet swaying freely with the wind. Be like that tree, grounded yet detached in harmony. Embrace the present, let go of attachments, and watch as peace naturally flows into your life. This moment is all you need. Created by Elias Stasinos. Leave your opinions or questions in the comments.